Today we're going to talk about what's my expression. What that means is, last week when we talked, we were taking T-charts and we were evaluating expressions within a T-chart. Okay, so if you remember correctly, we've had several things with these expressions. I've given you several values. A is equal to 5, B is equal to 6, C is equal to 7, and gave you several expressions to work with those static values. Okay, and we had to evaluate those. Then we had an expression where I gave you multiple values to evaluate that with a single expression. Okay, and we organized our information in a T-chart. So this T-chart, if you remember correctly, it talks. It says something. Okay, so let's see if we can review what it says, and then we'll talk about how to solve this. This expression, or this T-chart here, says if x is negative 2, then 3x minus 2 is what? And the first thing that we learned to do with this one was we learned to evaluate an expression using this T-chart. So we've got the expression 3x minus 2. Well, the first thing I want my students to do is change minus to addition, next number to its opposite, because that helps us prevent some careless mistakes. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take this value of x and we're going to plug it into 3x plus negative 2. So I'm going to draw a line here so I can have my work on one side and have my answer here on the other to fill out my T-chart. So what this one says is 3 times negative 2 plus negative 2, because I take this negative 2 and replace the x with that negative 2. So now we do the math. 3 times negative 2 gives us negative 6. Negative 6 plus negative 2 gives us negative 8. Now our x value changes. So we now have 3 times negative 1 plus negative 2. So 3 times negative 1 gives us negative 3, plus negative 2 gives us a negative 5. Now our last value that we're going to evaluate is 0. So we have 3 times 0, which is 3, plus negative 2 gives us a negative 2. Now what I allowed you to do was for the last two values of x, use the pattern that you find to complete the T-chart. So here it looks like I'm going from 8 to negative 5, I'm adding 3. Negative 5 to negative 2, I'm adding 3. So I'm going to add 3 more and I'll get a 1. I'll add 3 more and I'll get a 4. Okay? And we know we're adding because these numbers, the negative 8, negative 5, negative 2, 1, and 4, they're actually on a number line going to the right. So I know they're increasing in value. So what I asked you to do with this was begin looking for any consistent patterns. And what we determined was that this number right here always showed up when x is 0. It was the y value when x was 0. And that became very important, or will become important today. This 3 always told us what our pattern was. It told us what we were going to count by. So those were some things that we looked at last week. So let's see if we can do another one of these T-charts with only using what these numbers represent. Well, what we need to really remember is that last week we also talked about this equation, y is equal to mx plus b. And we'll spend some more time in just a few moments talking about what m really is. But this b value, we called it the y-intercept. It was extremely important to understand that when we're talking about a graph. Okay? The m was actually talking about the slope. Okay? So these values in the T-chart are found in certain places. We know that this number right here is always going to be found as the y value when x is 0, because that's going to be our y-intercept. Because if I plug the 0 into anything right in here for x, no matter what m is, anything times 0 is 0, and I will be left with that value. This number, or the slope, is going to tell me what I'm going to count by if this side here is equal to 1. Okay, so I'm going to count by 2, so 4 plus 2 will give me 6, and 6 plus 2 gives me 8. Going back up, I just subtract, you get 2 and 0. And that's the fast way of filling out a T-chart. But what we need to really refer to today, or talk about today, is what if I give you a complete T-chart and ask you to find the values, ask you to find the m and b value. Okay? And now that we know a little bit about what we're doing with those values, we can do that. Okay? So let's see if we can do this. to find this b value right here, all I have to do is look for the y value when x is 0. So I slide down my x list until I find x is 0, and I look for the y value, which is 1. So this value is going to be a 1. Okay. Now, to find my slope, I actually need to look at the pattern on the right, which is counting by 1, but I also need to look at the pattern on the left, which shows me that it's counting by 1 also. And what we're really going to do is we're going to take the pattern on the right and divide it by the pattern on the left. Okay? So 1 divided by 1 is 1. So this expression would be 1x plus 1. Or the way we would really write it, if it's just a single x, I don't have to put the 1. I just put x plus 1. Now let's look at this idea of pattern on the right and pattern on the left. What we need to really know is that this relationship between the right-hand side and the left-hand side is called slope. And in the y equals mx plus b formula, this m is called slope. And the way we find that is by using the formula delta y divided by delta x. Well, this triangle is kind of funny until we know what it stands for. It is a Greek symbol that stands for the change in. Okay, so slope really is the change in y, the pattern on the right, divided by the change in x, which is the pattern on the left. And that's how we find this slope right here. So let's look at another one. Okay, here's another one. We're going to do several of these, so just be patient. Be patient. So in this one, the first one, we want to try to find our b as much as possible. Okay, if we can, at all possible, find it first. Okay, because it's the easiest one to find. And we know this one is going to be found, the b value. It's the y value when x is 0. So I go down the x until I find 0. I look for the y value. It is 4. Okay. The slope, or the m value, is going to be found by the pattern on the right divided by the pattern on the left. 2 divided by 1 is 2. Okay? Now, an intelligent person will always check their expression just to make sure that it is correct. So we take a value, any one of the x values that we have, and we plug it in. So I'm going to take this 2 value right here. I'm going to plug it in right there. So 2 times 2 plus 4, does that equal 8? And yes, it does. So that expression is correct. Okay? So let's do one more like that, and then we'll kick it up a notch. Okay? So here we look for our b value. It is the y value when x is 0. So I know this value is 7. Okay? Now I look for my 2 patterns. My pattern on the right is plus 3. My pattern on the left is plus 1. 3 divided by 1 is 3. Okay? So we check our value just to make sure. 3 times 2 will give me 6. Plus 7, will that give me 13? Yes, it will. So that is correct. Okay, what about this one? Okay, this one is kind of the next level up. Okay, so again, the first thing I want you to try to find, if at all possible, is find your y-intercept value, your b value. And again, this value is going to be the y value when x is 0. So we come down to x is 0, we see that it's 3. Now we look for our patterns. Okay, so our pattern on the right is going 5, 4, 3. We're actually subtracting 1. Subtracting 1 each time. Our pattern on the left is increasing by 1. So negative 1 divided by 1 is negative 1. So we have an expression of negative 1x plus 3, or just negative x plus 3. That would mean the same thing. Let's do one more like that, just to make sure we got it. Okay, so we look at this one. We go for our b value, our y-intercept. We know it's negative 2. It's the y value when x is 0. Okay, we look for our patterns. Our pattern on the right is subtract 4. Subtract 4. Our pattern on the left is 1. Negative 4 divided by 1, negative 4. Okay? If we were to check this, I would check it with a negative value, because I've got negative and negative, it'll make a positive. So negative 4 times negative 2 plus negative 2. So negative 4 and negative 2 make positive 8. Positive 8 plus negative 2 gives me 6. Perfect. Now, there is another way of writing this one. Okay? Another way of writing this would be negative 4x minus 2. We need to understand that this is the most simplified form of this expression. On the STAR test, they will not give you a plus and negative. They will give it to you as a minus. So we need to remember that. Okay? Well, what about this? What if my x values don't have a 0 in it? What if my x values don't have a 0? All right? Well, that means that we can't find our y-intercept first. We may actually have to go do something. And there's two ways of finding that. One way, since we're at 3 right here, I could just go find it. Here we got 3, 4, 5. We're just counting by ones. So I could just go 2, 1, 0. And find, oh, there's 0 right there. Okay, and here I'm counting by ones. 4, 5, 6, 7. I just count back up. 3, 2, 1. There's my 0 value, or my b value. Okay, and I know that it's 1. So now if we look at our patterns, increase by 1, increase by 1, okay, we end up with 1x plus 1, or just x plus 1. But there is another way of finding our b value, and that is find slope first. Find slope first. So again, we had a pattern of 1, pattern of 1. Our slope is 1. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take our x value, one of our x values, and plug it in and ask ourselves, what do I need in order to get this as an answer? So we plug this in. 1 times 3 will give me 3, plus what will give me the 4 that I'm looking for? Well, I know that this is just 3 plus blank equals 4, but we know all I really need is a 1 there. So I place a 1. Okay? Let's try another one like that. Let's try another one. Okay? We're almost done with the lesson. Okay, so in this one right here, we're at 7. I'll be real honest, I don't really want to work it all the way up to 0. It's going to take way too much work. So what I'll do is I'll just find the slope first. So I look for my pattern on the right, increasing by 3. Pattern on the left, increasing by 1. 3 divided by 1 is 3. So I'm going to take any one of these values right here. So I'm going to take the 7. I'm going to plug it in. Right? 3 times 7 plus blank equals, well, what does it need to equal? It needs to equal this one right here. It needs to equal 12. Right? So I've got 3 times 7 is 21. What do I need to do to 21 to get a 12? I need to subtract 9. So I'll just add a negative 9. So my b value then would be a negative 9. And if we check that with another x value just to see, I'll check it with the 10 right here. 3 times 10 plus negative 9, does that equal 21? Well, let's see. 30 plus negative 9 does equal 21. Perfect. Okay. Let's try another one. Okay, this is going to kick it up a notch. Okay, got a couple more notches to go, and then we'll be done. Okay, so in this one right here, again, I do not have a 0 value. Okay, I don't have my b value. Okay, so I'm going to find slope first. So I look at my pattern on the right. It's 4. I look at my pattern on the left. Oh, here's my difference. I no longer have just a pattern of 1. I now have a pattern of 2. So this is where we need to know that our slope is always found by the pattern on the right divided by the pattern on the left. 4 divided by 2 is 2. Okay? Now we take one of our values, plug it in. 2 times 4 plus what equals, what is it supposed to equal? It's supposed to equal 6. Okay, so 2 times 4 is 8 plus what equals 6? Negative 2. Okay, negative 2. So we end up with 2x plus negative 2. Or another way of writing that is 2x minus 2. Okay, simple as that. Right? Let's try one more like that. And then we've got 2 more stages to go through, and then we'll be done with the lesson. So in this one right here, again, I don't have an x equals 0, so I can't find my b value. So I find my slope first. Okay, so I look for my pattern. 9 to 15 is increased by 6. 6 to 8. 8 to 10 is increased by 2. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. Okay, we take one of our values, plug it in. Okay, so I'm going to take this 6 right here. 3 times 6 plus what will equal, what's it supposed to equal? supposed to equal 9. Okay, so I've got 18 plus what will give me a 9. And we know that's got to be a negative 9. Now, it seems like on this lesson, I use negative 9 or I use a negative number a lot. This number doesn't always have to be negative. It could be a positive number. It could be plus. Okay, it just so happens that these ended up being like that. Another way of writing this could have been 3x minus 9. And that would be a more correct, simplified version. Okay, 2 more questions, 2 more things, and then we'll be done. Okay, so when we look at this one right here. Okay, again, do I have a 0 value? I don't. Okay, but this one I could actually just go find it, because you'll notice here on the x's, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, where would 0 be? Right there. Okay, so we could do the same thing here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there's my b value. Okay, now I look for my patterns. Increasing by 1, but on the right-hand side, on the left-hand side, I'm decreasing by 1. So 1 divided by negative 1 is still negative 1. So your x values can also be kind of strange. They can be different. And then this could also look like negative x plus 7. Okay, one last question, and then we're done. Now this one was the strangest one of all. Okay, so again, I don't have a b value. Okay, so I'm going to just go ahead and find my slope. So I look for my slope right here. 2 to negative 2 gives me negative 4. 6 to 9 gives me 3. That's strange. Well, we know that slope, or m, is equal to delta y divided by delta x, which is the change in y divided by the change in x. This is nothing but a fraction. That's what a division problem really is. So it's okay when I have a negative 4/3 as a slope. It's perfectly fine to have that. Okay? Matter of fact, slope, it is in the form of a fraction. Okay? And when we try to graph this, that slope will definitely be helpful. Okay? Now I need to find my b value. So I'm going to take one of my x's here, plug it in. And this is where we got to think about our fraction rules. Okay, so I've got negative 4/3 times 6. Well, in order to multiply by fractions, I need them both to be fractions. So I put the 6 over 1. And then I see that I can simplify a top and a bottom. So here, this 3 and this 6, they have a 3 in common. So this 3 turns to a 1. The 6 turns to a 2. And this actually ends up being negative 8. Okay, so I've got negative 8 plus what will give me a 2, because that's what I need to get out of it. Well, if we think about this in terms of a number line, okay, here's negative 8, okay, here's 0, here's 2. How far do I have to go to get to 2? I've got to go from 8 to 0, negative 8 to 0, which is 8 spots, plus 2 more. So it's actually a 10. So we end up with negative 4/3 x plus 10 for our expression. So that's our lesson on going from a t-chart to an expression and looking at the majority of the possible things that can happen when we are trying to create an expression out of a t-chart.